Hi, thanks so much for joining my webinar today. This is about peace, which is so near and dear to my heart because, as I've concluded some time ago, happiness is very cheap when it's relative to peace. And inner peace is the most important thing you can ever attain in your life because that gives us the footing to deal with all the other nuances of life, the residual conflicts in our life, and also the deep-seated pain that we've confronted in different situations, almost sometimes repeat situations in our life. So when we're choosing peace as our threshold and our goal in our lives, that shift alone changes our perceptions of what we're experiencing. So I want to propose to you the spiritual component on achieving peace and acknowledging that we experience a lot of things in our lives which created a lot of pain in our lives, and we carry that residual pain in our lives. And at the point of where we are right in this moment, as I'm presenting this course to help transcend these issues, we are looking at our continual relationships and the familiar pains that we've had in our lives. So if you've had the continual pain of being insecure or being jealous or having feelings of unworthiness to whatever extent, just general feelings of insecurity in certain situations, if you go deep into those issues, you can see that there was likely, more likely than not, a situation in your upbringing, a situation when you were little with those that were your parents or caregivers, and somehow they gave to you what was already in their limited belief systems. So they told you that this type of person behaves like this, or if you behave like this, I'm gonna give you a reward, and if you don't, I won't. The conditioning that you've received when you were younger is also the conditioning and the origination of your pain in this lifetime. Now, I will say that there is certainly a lot of instances where you may be carrying pain from other lifetimes, and I'm looking forward to exploring my teachings along those lines. But in this context, just in looking at your first-hand pain in this life, there is a core of that pain. And when you start to identify the core of that pain and start to choose your reconnection to that pain source from one of peace versus one of pain, you shift everything, sometimes instantaneously. But obviously confronting that is one of the larger challenges, and getting to the point of being able to confront that is where we are right now, right here. So if you're choosing peace in your life and you want to create that space to maybe recreate certain relationships or lessen the stranglehold of some relationships in your life, this is an opportunity to do so, and I encourage you to do so. You know, firsthand, I've gone through very challenging interpersonal relationships and very trying times. And when I was in one of the beginning precursors of my spiritual journey from a conscious state, for me, it was post-motherhood. It became more of a conscious state. I had this affirmation I would say over and over in my mind that a very dear friend of mine told me, is all is well and I am safe. And at that time, I had a lot of anxiety in my life. There was a lot of different happenings in my life that were very stressful and beyond measure, and in even my recollection right now, what I was going through. But that I had a feeling of lack of safety, and lack of safety was creating me to feel ungrounded, excuse me, and not secure. So as I started to say that over and over again, all is well and I am safe, I really started to build acumen in my heart about being able to create a sense of wellness and create a sense of peace in my life. So that affirmation is very powerful, especially if you're just beginning, and maybe when you're confronting one issue, you become very stagnated by that. All is well and I am safe is extremely powerful. So in going through that part of the journey and continuing on in that, and realizing that there were a lot of situations in my life and a lot of relationships in my life where I was not able to feel empowered by virtue of my continual the continual part of me continuing in the relationship, so the continual dysfunctional cycle in whatever situation I was confronted. So I would be creating the same responses and the same reactions to situations, not really full force understanding that the underlying experience I was experiencing when in this context was with another person, I just didn't feel even empowered in that reaction. It just felt you're just doing the reaction, and yet you're just making it more awkward for yourself or more uncomfortable for yourself because something underneath it just wasn't true. Something is not true when you're in that reactionary state and just dealing with relationships and people, family members, intimate relationships, friends. There's a point where when you're looking to release yourself from these sameness and the same reactions and the same BS, somehow things start creating space for you. And this is one of those things that started creating space for me in my life, was just acknowledging that, you know, this isn't a situation where I'm feeling empowered in my reactions. It's almost just the reactions are so habitual, I wasn't able to regain my footing over them. And that made me consider more my perceptions on what was going on in my life. And that brought to a different perspective of my spiritual journey, and understanding that from a spiritual perspective, not only are we spiritual beings having interrelationships with other spiritual beings, but we're also connected on a core level with contracts with certain people. And in order for us to also release the bondages of those relationships, we have to confront the underlying impetus of those relationships. And that's always the lesson that you need to learn. That's your lesson. And sometimes that lesson is just how do you accept whatever shortcoming was in your life? Because when we have these painful situations, it brings up to our attention what is wrong inside of us, what we need to fix inside of us in order that we can, you know, fulfill our highest good, fulfill our contract in that regard, but also to just feel empowerment, to feel peace. And peace is freedom, right? So all this is peace, but peace means freedom. It means that you have the space to react the way that you want to react, and you have the space to perceive things as you want to perceive them. And that's a lot of where the anxiety comes in for people, is that when you're in that place of waiting for another person to call you back, or waiting for some event to occur in order for you to feel a sense of wholeness about a situation, that space lag is where a lot of anxiety happens, and that bad thinking patterns happen. So in choosing to have peace, and the bottom underlying core of things, in choosing to have peace, it means that you're choosing your way forward that is aligned with your highest purpose. So that when you have reactions, you're not cringing at your reactions. You're not looking back at your reactions stating, oh goodness, I wish I didn't do it that way, or then you have to do whatever kind of dysfunctional cleanup in that relationship. If you have an outburst or whatnot, then you have to, you know, go back in that dysfunction of, it's disgusting, really, in the sense that it's not true, and everyone's playing a different role, and nobody wants to play that role, and everyone's just stuck in this habitual dysfunctional cycle. And how does that change? It only changes if at least one person breaks free from that and chooses to have peace in their reactions, chooses to change the relationship by virtue of their perception of the relationship. So that's really transformative. But again, that's the secondary relationships with other people. What is your relationship with yourself? And how have these upbringing conditionings affected your aptitude now to look at what is going to be good for you? What is a good relationship for you to engage in, whether it's friendship, whether it's even members of your family whom to deal with, and obviously with your love relationship as well. And creating that idea of possibility for freedom of your relationships, and freedom and directing anew your focal point for your for your relationship attractions and whom you want to intend to develop deeper kinds of communion with each other. Who are you co-creating with and the higher plane of your life, from the higher purpose of your life? These are who the energies are best bet to share time with, right? And share intentions with. But you can't even get to that if you're still inside of yourself, having bad thinking, having anxiety, and being overwhelmed by stress. You know, a lot of times with stress, that feeling that you have to get something done and not getting it done is almost immediately resolved by organizing your thoughts, organizing your plan, and setting the course on that. That's day 6 in the 7 day, is discipline and commitment. And I just love the concept of discipline, because personally I've reaped a lot of benefits from having discipline, and having commitment to inner peace is absolutely the most important commitment that you can have. Because as we develop our peace and as we connect to our sense of peace, we are able to really stand in our place of wellness. And it's the abundance, it's the love, it's the joy. But it doesn't have to be any of those things though too. I believe that peace is a state that we can exist on and continually exist on. So when we're looking and delving into our perceptions of what that means and why choosing peace changes everything, we always have we have so much power in our minds and in our intentions that we create results. So oftentimes if we're having a stressful situation with a colleague or a friend, our positioning, our mental positioning of that situation actually affects the outcome of that situation. So thinking positively, sure, very relevant, but it's also from a place of that this situation will be resolved in the highest good of all. That's a Louise Hay saying. She's so delightful, Louise Hay. If you haven't read any of her books, I encourage you to do so. She has a lot of audios too online. But that idea really struck me at one point when I'd heard it a few years ago. So we have so much aptitude to create. And so when we're not in this continual state of creating the pain and doing it this way, we have a choice to create it from the perspective of being in peace, and not in a place of peace and complete kumbaya. No, peace also means full acceptance of whatever it is that's going on around you. I mean, sure, it could be begrudgingly. If you're just starting, you can begrudgingly be accepting of whatever situation you're going through, and then build on that, and build on that, and draw upon your connection with your divine, and draw upon your inner strength and outer strength, and build on that. But once you come from a place of acceptance, at least then you're not battling that resistance part of the equation of you wish that wasn't happening, or why this or why that, or all that brouhaha that means nothing, because the situation is as it is now. So in order to even change that, you must accept that situation as it is now and then evolve from it. How do you evolve from it? Is that you create new perspectives on the situation, so you can allow for yourself to creatively manifest differently within that situation, or change the whole situation outright. So this 7-day plan has been very cathartic for me. I've authored this plan. I think I started in 2014, a 7-day journey. So it's evolved in the concepts of the days, but I really believe it's a very succinct module to start breaking the stranglehold that different emotions that are not even now in a free will type situation with you, they become more habitual for you. just changing your perception of those habits and your reactions, and allowing for you to perceive it differently, taking a big sense of accountability and responsibility of what's happening in your life in order that you can change that and delve deeper into what your spiritual path is and your spiritualized self is. Because I assure you, it's not one riddled with anxiety and stress, and one that is not making you feel empowered in your reactions to other people, because you haven't allowed yourself the space to meet people with your new evolved self. You know, you have to keep reintroducing yourself. You never have to do it, but in the sense is you're consistently being reintroduced to yourself on this journey. So there's always another new meetings of the mind, especially in the lower vibrational relationships that maybe you have, that are maybe familial or just very old relationships that have been in your life for some time. But as you get deeper in the peace process and you reintroduce yourself, you get deeper into this idea that the love that you develop in your heart, that's the true peace. The peace is love in your heart. And when you have that tremendous love in your heart, you're able to have compassion and empathy in a different way than you maybe have ever understood that. Because you're also able to get to the depth of your own suffering on a first hand, and a depth of your suffering on a human level, and you're able to have a different agreement with yourself about it. A different agreement with yourself. Thank you. A different agreement with yourself about it. Because you understand that you can raise your dimension, you can raise your consciousness once you shed this pain and these forgotten nonsenses and these relationships that are in a dysfunctional state of affairs that just brings you back more pain. More pain. It's the high and the low game. So this is a beautiful journey. I'm so happy to have been here to whatever capacity and supporting you on that journey. I hope you consider buying the class, enrolling in it, and I would really love to see you on the other end in our Facebook closed group. So thanks again so much for joining me on my webinar, and I will talk to you soon. Namaste.